Okay, let me see if I can retrace the events of this crazy weekend. So, today is Monday morning, the August 28th, 2023, of course. I worked Friday at the office, and here's the events as I recall them. I get a call from Randy DeHaven, the other crate guy, and he said, "Man, you got to get down here. You got to see these chemicals." Something to that effect. And so after work, oh yes, I said, okay, let me go grab my waders. So I live just minutes from the park. On the way home, I get home, I grab the equipment, my mask, and I head down. Now he's in the area of the fish kill. And that's a cool hawk sitting on a wire. Red-tailed hawk. So remember, he's at the area of the fish kill where they knocked the bridge down. And when I say bridge, this was not a massive structure. This was a very old bridge. You're lucky if it's longer than the length of a, double cab pickup. Very, very short. Probably maybe 30 feet long. I don't know for sure. Some people can look that up. And 2-lane. Just a small bridge that you would see in a park. That becomes important later because it's not a massive structure that needs such an intense, let's say, building project, I believe, with the pumps and everything they have. I'll explain the pumps and why we believe those pumps are there. So it's Friday night, I head down, and what I see is where I was poking sticks in the bank just days before days before they knocked the bridge down, knowing that when they knocked the bridge down, they were going to release all those chemicals. Because I was poking the stick in the bank just before they knocked the bridge down, and chemicals were coming out. So what I see as I get there Friday night, and Randy's waiting for me, is a single depression, a pit, if you will, in the bank of one scoop of a backhoe. And they've got large buckets there. So you're talking 4 feet wide by 8 to 10 feet long by about 5 feet deep. I can estimate the depth because I got in it with my waders. And it started to sink almost like quicksand, so I got out and headed more to the edge. But so as I look down at the water, it's perfectly clear. We start digging, knocking, just walking around this depression, and chemicals are just oozing out of the sidewalls. If you think of this depression as a swimming pool, an in-ground swimming pool, imagine kind of like The Shining, where the blood is coming out of the elevators. There are massive amounts of chemicals oozing from the sides of this wall, the walls of this depression. There's so many points here. Number one, why did they stop? Why did they stop? Here's what I believe. This was some of the worst contamination that I've seen since the beginning of this derailment, the 6 months. You're going to see footage of it. When whoever took that scoop saw those chemicals, and they made a phone call, and I think work was immediately stopped. Because what you're going to see is horrendous. It's horrific chemical contamination. Now it's getting harder. Another point is it's harder and harder for us to display these chemicals because as the months pass, they go deeper and deeper into our land. No longer are they just inches from the surface, but they're feet from the surface. As this bucket made this 5-foot depression, it was a gift to us. Almost like a geological experiment where you'll see geologists look at layers of the earth to see what's in there. They dig down. As we dig down as we poke the walls of this depression, 8 inches to a foot to 2 feet down, the chemicals just ooze out. That tells us that they are no longer near the surface. They're working their way down into the soil, down closer to the 30 and 50 foot wells that we drink out of, our private wells. Heading more toward the aquifer. So the one point is, that's why people are fooled, and the Norfolk Southern, the EPA, CTEC, or CTEH, it's not CTEC, CTEH, can give these glowing reports. Progress made in the newsletter. Because the chemicals are sinking deeper and deeper. Now here's another point. When you see this chemical contamination, you are most likely going to be shocked, unless you're one of the people that say, those chemicals are good for me. They're going to make my mitochondria into superhuman mitochondria. And I'm going to be like the Hulk or Spider-Man. I'm going to be a superhero after I drink those chemicals. No big deal. And maybe that's true. Maybe I should drink them. Anti-aging. Well, anti-aging because you won't age anymore. You'll drop dead. So anyway, in the miles and miles of banks, do you think, well, it's foolish to think that they were just lucky or unlucky, depending upon your perspective, unlucky enough to choose a 4-foot wide by 10-foot long by 5-foot deep piece of earth that they just happened to find an enormous vein of these deadly toxic chemicals. They didn't do some type of is it a dividing rod looking for chemicals, and they didn't do some study and say, hey, I think the chemicals are there, let's put the bucket there. No. There are thousands of 4-foot wide, 10-foot long areas all along the miles of the creek bed that you could choose, and most likely you'll get the same chemical contamination. We just don't have the capability of doing that with our sticks and with our shovels. What do you think the odds are that they took one shovelful, and there's no other chemicals anywhere, but in the 4 by 10 by 5-foot deep space that they miraculously chose to locate chemicals? So here's what I believe happened. They took a scoop and they said, oh shit. I mean, the chemicals are horrible. There's more chemicals than water in there. And they made a phone call and they said, stop work immediately. And they left that depression sit there filled with water as water's flowing in and out. And you can see where they tried to dam up. We have video where they tried to dam up the water from coming into that depression. But, you know, they're just workers, so they didn't dam it up too well. And then they dammed it up where the water was going out. Because, you know, if you dig a hole next to the creek in the bank, the water from the creek is going to meander its way into that hole and fill it up to the level of the creek. And that's why the water was so deep in the depression. So you'll see where they tried to stop water from flowing into it and tried to stop water from flowing out. So they got a phone call. The think tank says, hey, we need to do something. So they come up with a plan. And meanwhile, we're getting caught. They're calling the police on us. CTEH is warning us to get out of there. The police twice. We'll talk about that story. But we see now, which weren't there before, the pair of pumps. And when I say pumps, I don't mean small water pumps. I mean pumps powerful enough to pump 12 to 15,000 gallons per minute. These pumps are going in. I think I'll go bass fishing later. Lake looks good. Different lake. Well, not City Lake or State Line Lake. This lake is about 12 miles away from Palestine. Where was I? Yeah, so these pumps. The bridge was knocked down at the confluence of where Sulphur Run and Leslie Run meet. It's like a point just above the bridge. As Sulphur Run empties its toxic contents into Leslie Run, it increases the amount of obviously toxic chemicals that go into Leslie. So you can see where they put a pipe vertically so that as the water from Sulphur comes down into Leslie, they put a pipe vertically into Leslie Run so that they could put, and those pipes are empty, they're just void of anything. So this pipe, when you put it in the creek and you make a depression in the creek, you have somewhere that you can put your sucking hoses in to suck water out of Leslie to dry it up. So these pumps were never on the entire time, the 3 days we were there, displaying these chemicals. We have most likely over 2 hours of film of these chemicals. So anyway, the way they have this routed, the pumps pull water out right where Sulphur would be emptying into Leslie, and then it bypasses the bridge work area and it dumps it about 50 feet down into the area of the fish kill. So they're taking Sulphur Run water, they're sucking it up and bypassing the bridge. Now, you might say that's a normal course of action. Well, we've been down there the entire time that they've been knocking that bridge down, and they never had these massive pumps. You'll see, looks like the Alaskan pipeline. They're so big. The pipes that are sucking the water down to the fish kill area 50 feet beyond the bridge. So it's a very large project, overkill for this tiny 30 to 40 foot bridge, maybe in the park. So they're just overdoing it. And here's what we believe is happening. So let's go over the course of events. We got there Friday and we're filming. And we both made a pact that we weren't going to release anything. We're going to let this whole thing play out, because every time we release something before that incident is either resolved, or if we release something and we don't have all the information, we go back and it's sabotaged. A few months back, something going on up here. A few months back, I showed video of horrendous contamination in Sulphur Run. I go back a couple days later and the whole creek is drained. And you can't show chemicals when the creek is drained. And that gets to a point later about what I'll be talking about with what they're doing here. So we don't release anything Friday night. We go back. I work until noon on Saturday morning. We go back. Chemicals are horrible again. We go back Saturday night, and same thing. We get really good or bad footage, whichever your perspective is. Bad because the chemicals are so horrible there in quantity and whatever they are. But this is a little interesting. There's a worker that comes down, and she calls CTEH on us. So this is the company that CTEH is the company that Norfolk has contracted to do their testing, and you can look into what else they do, and you can look into their reputation as well. So a guy with a black SUV, you know, the Men in Black type thing, or the type you see in the movies that are escorting the president, they all have these black SUVs. He comes down and he says, "Hey, you guys got to get out of there." And we say, "We're not moving. We're documenting these chemicals. You need to leave." "Well, who's going to make us leave, and why are we leaving?" "You're there unlawfully." "And why are we there unlawfully?" Because this caution tape is here. So the caution tape makes it unlawful to be in a creek that I think it's under federal what is that called? Jurisdiction. So I fish. I don't, you know, you can look it up. I don't know. I believe you can walk through waterways. I believe even in people's land. You can look that up to make sure. But we're in the waterway. We are on the dirt. So there's that. And we weren't being argumentative. And he was polite but firm. You know, he was okay. And he said, "I work for CTEH. You guys need to leave." And I said, "Hey, look at these chemicals. Do you see them?" And he wouldn't say verbally yes, but he shook his head yes. And I said, "If this was in your backyard, would you be concerned?" He said, "I get it, guys." Randy was there conversing with him as well. He said, "I get it, guys. I live by a small creek. We're not pro-Norfolk and we're not anti-Norfolk. We're just neutral. We're just here for the health of the community." And then he calls his security boss on us. He gets on the phone. So my thought was, if you were really here for the health of the community, wouldn't you look down at those chemicals and say, "Oh shit, man, let me call the head of toxicology of our CTEH department, or get somebody down here and look at what these guys are digging up." But no, instead he calls security to kick us out. Then he talks about us getting hurt. That's his main concern. Hurt in the creek. And we say, "No, we're outdoorsmen. We're not going to get hurt in the creek." And he said, "Well, something of the fact about him worried about us sabotaging their equipment." And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. We're not concerned with sabotaging your equipment. All right, to be continued with shorter hair. Just a shout out to the barbershop. These guys are great. They just opened a second location in Columbiana, Ohio. This is the barbershop in Boardman, Ohio. If you guys need a good haircut, come see Tommy or Frankie or Mike, or hit their new location in Columbiana, Ohio as well. And again, this is Boardman, Ohio, the barbershop.